I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. I am Ben Detrick. Jordan Redaelli is on vacation. And Andrew Kuo, thank God, doesn't take any days off. Andrew, what's new?
Chilling on a Tuesday. Really happy about that. Yo, shout out to Tuesday.
Club going up.
Doesn't get the respect. Everything, like, I hate Mondays. I love Mondays. Hump Day. TGIF. Thursday's the new Friday. Tuesday's the only day with no shine, man.
I feel like Thursdays had some sort of weird, like, 80s, 90s thing. It was like the sex day or something.
Whoa.
No, I can't remember what it was. It was something about Thursdays.
Thirsty Thursdays?
Thirsty Thursdays? I don't remember.
But,
Do you remember those things when you were a kid? It was like, if you wear green, you're horny. There was like, those little things. They may have been totally like isolated. There was no internet. You know, this is school related. You might have thought it was a cultural national movement on horny green Thursdays. And it just was like 15 kids.
I thought they were just talking about Knicks legend Keith Van Horn.
Horny Thursdays?
Yeah.
That's for Jeff Hornacek.
That's right. But good news. I found an extra 6-pack of toilet paper in my back room. It's incredible, man.
Sounds like someone's been hoarding.
I mean, been hoarding before this pandemic. I just
Hoarding Thursdays.
Hoarding Tuesdays. I thought I was going to have to go out prematurely this week instead of Saturday earlier, but looks like I'm set up.
So how much TP are you currently sitting on right now?
I'm looking at one roll in my bathroom and a 6 mega pack. A 6 mega equals 24 regular roll pack.
You're a hoarder.
I have one. I have a pack. I have an
24
extra pack.
rolls.
6 rolls equals 24 rolls, so it's 6, but it's marketed as 24.
Oh, I see. Okay,
that's
not really egregious then.
No, the cut's smaller, like they're perforated tighter, I think.
Or they're like half ply.
Yeah, exactly. They're flimsy. But I am a hoarder. Like, my dream is to have a second freezer. You know this about me. I long for the day to have like a serial killer freezer just full of dumplings somewhere in my house.
I gotta say, man, this is not about your serial killer dumpling fantasy. Most of the corona stuff is just like a general anxiety, and I think it's worth roasting hoarders. Not that confident in the food supply chain right now. Gotta say, getting a little bit anxious about the food supply chain.
Things are bad. News has been trickling out that the suppliers are just destroying food that they can't give away anymore, that are like kind of turned and unsafe. I think CNN had a piece this morning about like a squash farmer just destroying his crop because he couldn't give away anymore, and restaurants aren't buying anything.
Well, in Greenpoint, they've shut down one of their key foods because they said they couldn't get stuff. And
really?
Yeah, and then one of the organic markets that's fairly sizable as well. It's not like, a small corner one. It's a legit like grocery store. That shut down and is doing some curbside delivery. Like Wegmans, you get there at 7:30 in the morning. There's 50 people waiting in line to get in. Like it's a little dicey. I'm not saying anything is going to get gnarly, but you look at it and you're like, well, the farmers market's got people lined up around the block. Wegmans has people lined up around the block. Supermarkets are closing. Not great. Like, not ideal.
Yeah. I feel like the supermarkets closing, like Key Food, might be like employee related and safety related, but the food supply is going to be an issue really soon. And this is the thing I've been kind of most interested in recently, because we have to kind of apologize to toilet paper hoarders, because they might have been right in a weird, wrong way. It turns out you should have been hoarding toilet paper, and there's all these numbers about like how much toilet paper we use at work versus home, and we actually the people who produce the toilet paper for work environments don't produce home toilet paper, so there is an actual shortage. So stocking up has some legitimacy to it, but the food chain is going to be disrupted. Maybe it already has, now or soon.
Well, for example, I know in South Dakota, the governor was extremely reluctant and to shut things down. She's an absolute cretin, and she's still fighting against shutting things down. And they ended up having a huge corona outbreak at one of the largest pork distributors, processing plants in the nation. And and now it's like a huge corona hotspot because they didn't take any precautions. So the speculation, at least from the New York Times article I read, was that this is going to cause shortages nationwide because this huge, massive pork processing plant can't really function, and now there's corona everywhere there. And it's because the governor is like an absolute moron.
It's so funny, right? Because there is no food shortage. I think we figured this out in the last 15 to 20 years globally. Like, if there's responsible people, we can get food to places. And the fact that we're worrying about this is negligence. It's just people in charge making errors, I think, and not having a plan.
Well, it's not food shortage. It's the food supply chain.
Supply chain, right.
If you don't have people working in factories and you don't have people working in packaging and you don't have people shipping it, then food just sits where it is. To your initial point where, you've got a bunch of pumpkins and there's no way to get them into a supermarket. Well, the pumpkins are going to rot and the people won't eat. So it's very much the mechanics versus the product themselves. But we'll see what happens, because if it's products that are in the summer growing season and you don't have the ability to safely harvest them, then all of a sudden you're talking about errors, or you're talking about problems both with the collection of the food, the growing of the food, and the shipping of the food. That's a real issue.
It's so wild how it's hard for me to imagine this, because there's solutions every step of the way. And we're arguing about such ridiculous things, man. So suppressing my anger has been my main concern, because it's not being upset, but it's getting to a point where the stupidity is just compounding on itself. And you flip on the TV and these people just have no plan. There's no plan. And they're just arguing who is in charge of anything, and we're just waiting for someone to do something. It's like, well, I'm in charge. No, I'm in charge. It's like, well, it says in the Constitution, I'm technically in charge. It's like, but I'm the boss, so it's me, right? And I'm like, can we just not talk about this? Can we go by bullet point about what we need to do?
Well, the problem is that you have idiots in charge of half the country, and including really high positions. You have complete idiots in charge of stuff. And you look at that bill, and it was, that it came out that 80% of the relief is going to go to millionaires. It's just, everything is trash. We live in a trash country, and we're not going to be able to handle things in a competent or orderly or rational way, because those kind of decisions never get made. That's just not what we're doing as a country across the board. There's no reason that coronavirus would not be an opportunity for, venal, horrible human beings to try to enrich themselves and screw everybody else. It just falls in line with what we do as a nation.
Yeah, and what we do as civilians too. I'm not saying the manager at the local Key Food or the person online waiting to get into the Key Food with you is any better at making decisions, but I always think it's funny how politicians talk about such simple things as we've been working really hard. I'm like, well, that's the job. You applied for this. It's like, oh my God, I have to pod about basketball. I'm like, well, yeah, you do a basketball pod, and I expect that from humans, but it's just disappointing. So Calgon Take Me Away is like my hourly ritual. I have to chill because getting angry at home just is not helping.
Yeah, I'm pretty Gen X tranquility about this whole thing, but seeing the disruptions in the food chain and seeing the long lines, not that optimistic that this will get better before it gets worse, considering sort of where we are along the trajectory of this virus. Because if we are all smooth sailing in New York, as Cuomo has indicated, that the worst is over, but the worst is only starting in other places.
Yeah, and hopefully the worst is over here. But as we talked about yesterday, what is worse, right? Worse keeps on changing on us, so I don't even care about that feeling or that stat. But I did, the most alarming thing I did was filled up some jugs of water a few weeks ago. Just like in case, I'm like, hey, the water's working fine. I got my Brita filter. I'm just going to fill up these 2 iced tea bottles full of filtered water and just keep them on the shelf. And I felt myself kind of like, it was surprising of me. I don't know. I just didn't love that feeling. I
don't really know what you were doing with that because no one's threatening the water supply as far as I've heard, right?
This is my point. No one's talked about the water. There was discussions for a second, but no one's talked about it. I'm not hoarding water. Also, I noticed that the water is flowing and good, and I'm like, whatever. I've kept a bunch of water in my house before. Like, what's the difference now? It's just a bunch of water. But the behavior is not my favorite kind of behavior. I gotta
say, your lavish amount of space is just incredible.
Oh,
like you were living in New York City and you were hoarding water. Like, what a king.
You don't have an iced tea? Yo, you have a wine fridge.
Yeah, but it's in a closet.
Yeah, where do you think I'm putting the water? It's not like in my fridge.
Yeah, but you can't get wine from the faucet.
Depends on if you talk to Charlie Ward or not. Have you seen this thing on it happened a couple of days ago, but the topic of hoarding coffee was debated a little bit, and it was triggered by Jerry Saltz, an art critic, maybe the most famous art critic, host of a show, Work of Art, on cable, posted that he buys a super big gulp from 7-Eleven and puts it in the fridge and drinks it like throughout 3 days. And he's been bragging about this behavior for years, but it just got picked up and people debated it.
Well, it's because he put up a tweet. I don't know if it was on Instagram as well. I don't follow him on Instagram, but he put up a tweet showing like...
It was Instagram. Yeah.
Something like 18 coffees to go from a gas station.
He does this every few months. He does this. And
people are like, what is wrong with you, dude? Why are you buying 18 coffees to go?
I mean, without jumping into it, it's a type of virtue signaling, right? He's like, I'm just a worker. You guys are snobs. I am not a snob. I need to stay awake to write. And I love Jerry Saltz. He's awesome. But it's the kind of thing, like, if you did it, I'd be like, Ben, what's going on over there?
Well, he mentioned sort of coffee snobs or coffee hipsters or whatever phrase he was using repeatedly over and over. So it's clearly something that's performative, that he's drinking gas station or cheap bodega coffee and making a point to tell people that he is enjoying this style versus your artisanal expensive cup of coffee. That I get. That's cool, whatever. Like, gas station coffee is fine, man. I get it. I'm cool. It doesn't make you the salt of the earth, no pun intended. But my thing was more the buying 18 at once and then taking them home. That I don't get. The hoarding coffee. Why don't you just learn to make it? that was my thing. I don't really care about him saying, hey, you hipster doofuses, like, you want your, like, $7 cup of coffee? I'm over here at Mobile. Like, cool. Like, do your thing, man.
Yeah.
I don't get the not having the capability as a grown adult to make your own coffee.
Yeah, it's a kind of form of being a Luddite that I think is interesting. It's like, There was a movement maybe a year or two ago where Zoomers weren't using smartphones, and they were trying to sell these really basic phones with no internet or GPS or email. And I was like, that's cool as an idea, but like you're paying the same amount for a phone that does less as a political point. Like, you can get a Droid that does that, and it's a kind of like denialism that I think is funny at first and then just gets judgy really fast. And I love Jerry Saltz. I think he's an interesting guy, but he's been pushing this idea on social media forever. He's a bit of a social media police officer. He actively states that if you post a food pic, he's going to automatically unfollow you. Like, fine, unfollow me. But the irony is he goes viral this week for posting a food pic. And it's signaling something that I don't quite love.
Well, there's a fine line between saying, okay, I'm a Luddite, this is how I live, and I recommend it for you because it works for me, and being performative and making it a point that people know about you. If I said, look, I've gone to a flip phone and I recommend it for other people who may feel overwhelmed by having instant access to maps and Twitter and Instagram, etc. It's nice for me. It helps me escape. And I could advocate that on behalf of other people. But when I'm sitting here telling everyone, I only have a flip phone, just me, me, flip phone guy, I got a flip phone, there's a little bit of a difference, right? If I want you to know that I'm using a flip phone versus me explaining why it might work for others.
Yeah. And I'm being a hypocrite here because I love when people tell me stuff. I'm like, tell me more, tell me more. And when they slap my hand, it's funny. It doesn't really mean anything. But it goes to a point where we're talking about maybe a few episodes ago about kind of everyone turning into the headspace of what we think an artist is, like presenting our point of view. Like, what kind of isolationist during this coronavirus are you? Are you a bread maker? Or do you have thoughts about coffee? Do you only post photos that you took before? Do you talk about what your life would have been like as if this never happened? Like, there's all these different lanes that people are occupying now that I think are all pretty interesting, and we have to kind of look at them as even more than identity, whatever, politics or an identity push, but as like a creative idea. So when Jerry Saltz's impulse is to talk about and show us the coffee he's hoarded, is it an artistic impulse? I would almost say yes, right?
I think that's arguable. It also falls under the category of people trying to redefine themselves in a period of time when it's not possible to live the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't have your online persona be the guy who's in the party now. You just can't do it. You can't do it. You can't be, you can't be the traveler. You can't do any of those things. So you have to rely on either what you're doing in your house and suddenly become a domestic god,
mm-hmm.
or you have to go and put up photos of back in the day, missing your friends from like a month ago. Oh, remember when I was at this party with these people? How cool was that? I'm missing that. Or here I am on vacation in Bali. Take me back. I think everybody's struggling with this in a different way. And I'm not really judgy because I don't know how people are doing. And I don't think anyone knows unless someone tells you. Because when you normally are walking around the street and you see someone, you're like, hey, how are you? It's weird when people say, to be honest, not great. Having some real trouble. I'm struggling with this. You're like, whoa, dude, no. I just said, how are you? We're not actually exchanging, deep inner thoughts. And now that's kind of out of the window because we're all subjected to mutual trauma. So when you ask someone how they are, it is a real invitation for people to be honest with you. And that's a new sort of communication that you have with almost anybody.
Yeah, I find myself being the most unsympathetic version of myself at times like this, because with every email I'm like, oh, I hope you're well, and your family is well, and I hope you stay safe. And if someone's like, yo, I am not doing well, and I'm like, are you sick? It's like, no, I'm just freaking out. And I'm like, oh, get over it, we're all freaking out. And like, that's the worst part of me, to project that. But I totally agree, right? Like, do you express all these thoughts on social media? Like, how are we doing this when we're all just shacked up at home? Like, what kind of things are we projecting into the universe? Like, me and you are kind of lucky that we have this pod and we get to talk about it. But I think everyone is kind of pushed into a direction of having a stance. Like, are you a political person now? Are you a domestic, like, cooking person now? Are you a cat person now? Are you watching movies? Are you giving us reviews of The Wire again for the 15th time? Like,
Well, you know what? My counter to this idea is that we're all just much more online, and that's also the only place we now see people because we don't see them in real life. So we're not necessarily thinking about the people who maybe are at home and just watching movies and are not on Instagram and not on Twitter.
Yeah.
Because I've seen people like cropping up more on Twitter who were never on it before. And they're just like, I'm giving Twitter another chance. Like,
yeah.
I just got to kill some time. Like I can't watch TV all day. Instagram is too boring. I need to see some words. I need to see what else is happening. And I think the people who are online are generally like way more online. I think that other people might be, submerging into other parts of their life where they're just reading all the time, or maybe they're doing a ton of exercising or a ton of yoga, and we just may not see that.
Yeah.
We just don't have access to anyone outside of or we don't have easy access to people, superficial access outside of like Instagram and Twitter.
Yeah. If you're not online, are you even paying attention? Right. Like my closest friends are not online, and I have many online close friends that I love seeing on Twitter, and it's like split right down the middle, and that's where I can like really get into what someone like Jerry Saltz is doing. Like, he has a point of view. He's like, I'm gonna not do this and tell you why not. I'm like, that's kind of awesome. This is what we're doing, right? And it ties into the unfriend thing, because I'm kind of like, I would never unfollow somebody for being annoying, because you could just avoid them. But it depends on how you want to experience the platform, not your tolerance. It has nothing to do with like tolerance. It just has like, I want this thing to exist in a harmonious way, so I'm gonna curate it.
Well, you see people who get upset by trends and then sort of spur backlash. And I don't really get into that too much, when there's like the sour bread. Like,
it's hard to make sour bread, man.
But the whole sourdough starter thing, and then other people being like, oh, that sucks. And it's like, well, whatever, man. I don't really care about that. My only thing is that joggers should be arrested. That's really the only thing that gets my goat. I just looked out the window and saw a jogger, and like, I almost ran down and made a citizen's arrest. I just couldn't have caught him.
Wow.
He was moving too fast for me as a non-jogger.
Yeah, man.
I need like a lariat.
No laser pointers. Do not order a laser pointer. But,
some sort of lariat and, maybe some nets, maybe a trident.
I've been watching a lot of people showing their drip, their fits on Instagram more lately. I think like we reached a point where people are realizing we're in this for an even longer haul, and being like, I'm gonna bust out some looks a little bit and see what the internet thinks of my style, my fashion sensibility, and I've been loving it, man.
You're like, are those Knicks shorts? Are those Wallabies?
Is that a plain white tee?
But, I mean, my only thing about this, and again, this is not a moralizing thing at all. Because, right, we're just recreating our outside lives in the parameters of where we are now confined. But I saw, what's his name, the actor, Wendell, last name, from The Wire?
Oh, right. Yes. Go on.
Wendell Pierce, maybe? Something like that?
Yeah.
But, he had a tweet, and I kind of thought about it, where he's like, a lot of media attention is being paid to our new inconveniences and our new habits within, isolation. And, of course, that's our new lifestyle. But he was like, there is so much death happening. He's like, we have to remember, like, the sort of warehousing of sick elderly is going on. Like, hundreds of people are dying. And I was like, I get it. You can do both these things simultaneously. I'm not trying to sit here and say, like, we need to be talking about these old people who are dying. But it was like a sobering thought that how much we are talking about, oh, I want to see my friends. Oh, man. Oh, I got to wait in line to get food. You're like, yo, a lot of people have died. Lots and lots and lots of people are going to die. Like, I don't know. Again, that was just my thought when I read that. I was like, yeah, that's a good point. We kind of have to remember, like, this is really bad. Carl Anthony Towns lost his mom. This is really bad.
I'm on both sides of this. I remember when we were talking about when this was killing hundreds of people in China, right where it started. And I saw a video the other week of, I think for 3 minutes, all the cars stopped in China and in Wuhan, and they just honked their horns for 3 minutes. And it was fucking powerful, dude. It was crazy. Because to think about, we think about these Chinese statistics, and it's just like, oh, they're lying about it. There's more people. But these are people, and I think at the time I was like, and I stand by this, like, there's people with like pets and favorite foods and favorite movies. Like, they're not just extras in a movie.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. Yeah.
But then the opposite end of that is like, we all hopefully have the thought in our head, but there's always some person like the guilt cop, right? Who's like, guys, remember starving kids in Africa.
I know.
And I'm like, totally, and that's why I'm like for jokes. That's why I was really sad about April 1st kind of being canceled. I was like, we can use some good jokes. If they're bad jokes,
someone
we'll stop
being
them.
punched in the dick repeatedly.
Would you not laugh? You're like, no funniness.
No. I'm not that person who's like, yes, but what about the kids in Africa? The Mexicans at the border? Like, these are bad things, and we need to acknowledge them. But I did think about how much we've been fixated on our own inconveniences, and that's true. And that was kind of made me reevaluate that sort of, I don't know, the woe is me that we all have. Like, how you dealing with it? Oh man, this is ass. Just like that. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I guess my takeaway from his little tweet storm about how many people are dying, and to your point, these are people with favorite foods and favorite movies and loved ones and et cetera, et cetera. And we see some of that, but it's also like, let's be grateful if we're in a situation where that is not our reality. When our reality is like, I'm bored and I'm horny and I'm watching some TikToks and like, this is lame. Like, let's just remember that like there is a human cost that's more real, and there are people dying alone who are going to be buried on like an island, and we don't have to deal with that right now.
Yeah, and this is almost even not Corona take. Like, even our normal lives, like, I'm so busy. I'm like, oh, I'm so lucky to be busy. This is awesome that I'm busy. I'm
not trying to be a guilt cop at all. It was I was just, when I thought about what he said, it changed my opinion, and it made me want to modify the way that I interact with people who are like, how are you doing? Not that I've been like a big bummer, but like I want to be more positive.
Yeah, I mean, he's 1,000% correct, and it makes me think of that famous comic stand-up routine where it's like, I was on the plane and, I was sitting next to a kid, and the kid doesn't matter here. It's not a generational thought. It's like, and their smartphone, the Wi-Fi went out, and they were like, oh, I can't talk to the universe. He's like, you're in a plane moving at like the speed of light, and you have the world in the palm of your hands. You can't turn that off for like 4 hours and just exist. Like, you have to have this thing. And the joke was making fun of the person who was missing a thing that kind of didn't exist 5 years ago. But my take was, of course you miss it, because you're used to it. So if you had this thing that worked for years and someone takes it away from you, it's jarring. And context is everything here, but yeah, you take sitting on a plane for granted. It's like, oh, the legroom isn't great, the food is terrible. It's like, but you're in a plane. You don't have to like take a wagon and a horse across country. I'm like, no, but we know what planes are, so like we advance. Like we don't have to go back to post up isolation scoring anymore. Like we can do whatever.
Totally true. Totally true. And I agree with that. And that's like the sort of boomer thing. Well, you don't know how hard we had it, so you don't get shit.
Right.
You're like, well, the world is different.
Yeah.
And things change and things get better. And that's kind of the same as, you know, when people argue, well, I paid for my college education, so should Zoomers. And you're like, yeah, but like, why would you want them to deal with the same debt that you had? You're like, because I had to deal with it.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah. We could probably do better than that, though, right? Would you like to not have that debt? Yeah.
This is my pet peeve, hardest thing to wrap around this, the idea of eliminating student debt. It makes people think the hardest because, right, the initial pushback was, but I worked really hard to pay off my debt. I feel as if I'm almost being punished by letting someone else off the hook for something I had to really struggle and suffer through. And I'm like, oh my God, whatever you think empathy is, you're being challenged at your fullest right now because I hear you, but you're wrong. Like, we just have to help people moving forward, even if you don't like them, you know?
I was unjustly accused of a crime and spent 20 years in prison. Would you like this person who was unjustly accused of a crime to be freed? Right. I think they should probably spend 20 years in prison too, like me.
Right. Right. It's like we don't get mad at people who win the lottery the same way, you know? It's like, well, I worked really hard and I was able to get a mortgage and buy a house and start a family. It's like, oh, I won the lotto. I'm like, ooh, that could be me. You know, we don't do it the same way, but I think like something I was really into was eliminating student debt. And something I was not into was having us as a community to challenge ourselves to make it okay. It's too hard, you know?
Yeah, to me, it wasn't even about having that debate that meant some people would say, still not just comfortable with it because I had to do it. Like, not just get it done. Like,
yeah,
we don't have to win everyone over. Just snap your fingers like they did to throw a couple $1 trillion into the stock market and debt's gone. Yeah. Okay, you know, however you feel about it, we don't have to win you over.
Yeah, and
you don't have to come to peace with the fact that you paid X amount of money and someone else won't. Like, you're just gonna have to deal with that.
And I don't think everyone is Darwinian. I don't think everyone thinks in those terms, but I do think the principles of those ideas are something we think about even in a microcosm, even with like a roommate, right? Being like, oh, I clean the kitchen, therefore I can have the party, and then I'm going to move on to get a better apartment, and you haven't done the work, so, you know, you don't get to have the party, and you have to stay here. And it's something like that's so deeply American about that is jarring, but is not correct too. Like, you know, people who are into eliminating student debt would say to people who weren't, it's like, oh, you're a great American. You paid off your student debt. You're probably a really successful person in one way or another as a someone in a family situation or somebody in business. Like, you have that drive, and congratulations, you've done great. Now we got to help other people, you know? And it's a really confusing thought.
I mean, I think the idea is those people who did pay off their debt should channel their resentment not towards the people who don't, but towards the system that made them do that. I think that's how it needs to be approached. To say, no, you shouldn't be jealous of a younger person who, in this hypothetical situation where America did the right thing, doesn't have to pay for higher education. You shouldn't be mad at that person. Be mad at the people who made you pay. And ask for more from your government. Ask for health care. Ask for, you know, child care. Ask for help from your government to make up for the fact that you paid for your education.
I listened to like painfully. I mean, they were funny about it too. An economics podcast about student debt, and they were like, "It's a big problem, but let's just like look at the stats here, sort of like a shot chart." And they're like, "Universities are just hiring too many people. So like one professor 20 years ago would maybe have one assistant, but now a powerful professor would have three assistants, and we're hiring too many professors with too many assistants, and it's driving up the cost of this thing. Again, this is they were like smiling through it, it's like it's too simplified. But the reason why education is skyrocketing is because the thing itself, beyond government, beyond feelings, is universities are just creating too many costs. And if they reduce costs, hypothetically, it wouldn't cost as much. And now there's too many universities, and you're saturating the workplace with these degrees. And it's just like, universities should just pull back a little bit. But why would you if you're generating money? So it was just like kind of like a shot chart pod, but I can't stop thinking about it.
Right. I mean, you also have all these universities at the top who are full of legacies and are also getting massive endowments. Like there are pretty systemic issues with the higher education system in America. I forget the stat, but it was like Harvard or something, like 40-50% were legacies or something. It was outrageous how many people went there, whose parents went there, grandparents went there, people who had given money, built a wing, etc. In a way that you almost looked at Harvard and you're like, oh, this is just sort of a scam. Like, just in general, like this is a business that you guys are running to churn out people who will give you money later, and to, keep the coffers full with people who do this on a generational basis.
Yeah, I don't think the intent's debatable, but I think it got really away from people. It got out of grasp in the last 20 or 30 years, and there was no one on each level of leadership that was creative enough to like change it. So we're here, and I agree it's broken and we should fix it, but I see as it's something that like it got so far away from somebody so fast, sort of like a flood, that it's just like, oh, somebody who told us we should have built a dam? I forget, like it got far away from people, and it's the whole like premise of the okay boomer thing. It's like,
yeah, I mean, I also view, if you look at like Harvard or the schools we're talking about, I don't view it as like it just got out of control. Like this is where they wanted to go.
Well, Harvard's different because they're successful. Like the Ivy Leagues are well-oiled machines.
That's what I'm saying. Like they are perfectly content with this system because they choose to use it.
Yeah,
like they keep rocking with it.
And there's no incentive to change because
there
is no flood for them. But it's so funny, like how now we're in quarantine and these politicians aren't really helping us. And I'm just looking to Harvard and MIT and Princeton, being like, are all your scientists working on this? I really hope so. Do you guys need more money? Do you need more time? Because we need you guys to come up with this vaccine that works, because no one else has any other ideas.
Like Harvard has a $40 billion endowment.
I mean, if they're going to come up with a virus for corona, let's do it. Let's go. That's a bargain. I don't know.
$40 billion.
Hey, we need that all for this little shot that hopefully everyone can get in 10 months.
Well, so in the meantime, before this vaccine arrives and we can actually go back to some semblance of normalcy, we've seen Taiwan attempting, out of everywhere else in the world, to try to get some sports back up on television. And
baseball back.
They're trying it with baseball, and there was some fairly funny videos of them setting up the stands with mannequins and cardboard cutouts. And
I think that was just the internet being funny. I think it was just empty.
Oh, was it? I thought that was real. So. I could have been wrong.
I think it was just a cool image.
Because maybe so. I have no idea, because I don't really pay attention to baseball.
Taiwanese baseball?
That I'm into, yes. But, so, I don't see... Oh, actually, let's give pro wrestling credit. They did try to keep it rolling for a little while there.
Is that a sport, or is that like a play?
Yeah, we don't need that debate. But they were at least doing...
You don't want that smoke.
They were doing live performances in an empty arena.
What's a performance? Yeah. Okay. No, I'm sorry. I'm an asshole.
So, if we're looking at baseball does not have the same amount of contact as other sports. It has the least of any major sport. Mm-hmm. But are they? I don't know about how Taiwan is doing it. Are they testing all the players? Is it like what's the system here, and is it replicable for baseball or excuse me for basketball, say in the U.S.?
I believe they are testing players, but it's like this whole thing is like a moving target. The minute a Taiwanese player gets sick, they've been irresponsible, right? But until then, they're good to go. It's so random, but so I don't think there's a succinct way to talk about that, other than take a precaution. You're taking a risk, and if the risk actually comes through, then we can blame you until the cows come home. But I was thinking more in terms of like what we expect to see. Like I find myself really hoping for the day when this is such a Trumpy thought, but like the day America's open again and we like cut a ribbon and there's like wonderful fresh bread scents in the air and everyone's playing sports and kids are running down the street with like lollipops, and it's not going to happen. It's going to be slow and sad and weird and have hiccups. And Taiwan is our kind of guinea pig for sports. And I wouldn't say there seems to be much joy in the imagery, but if I was a fan of Taiwanese baseball, I'd be really happy. And it's sort of like a test run that we will be participating in for years, it feels like.
I mean, when you look at baseball, it's not that difficult to figure out a way to play it with minimal risk of corona being spread. You're like, all right, the catcher is going to wear a mask. Batters can wear masks. The ump can have a mask. You know, they can move a little bit further apart. Pitchers kind of far away. The fielders are more than 6 feet apart.
I think you believe in social distancing more than I do. I don't think that really matters. I think optically, yeah, they're far apart. And then the minute they end the game, someone's like, how you doing, buddy? You good? And then both of them have it. You know, it's just like, I think the virus is more unpredictable than just distance.
I'm not sure what you mean when you're saying like after the game, like how are you? I just mean I don't know what you mean by that.
There's a dugout, there's a locker room, there's life, there's them driving in cars to like their house. Like they can catch it as many ways as a basketball player can.
I disagree in terms of the sport itself. I mean, it's not even close. Like that's why all these basketball players like you're like breathing on the other person. It's not like baseball.
That's a risky action, but I feel like in the pantheon of actions, like we're all just gonna get it at some point, right?
I mean, I think yes, if you're talking about being in the dugout aside other guys and being in the locker room, of course. I'm talking about the sport itself on the field is not one that I think would naturally lend itself to a lot of spread of the coronavirus in the way that like basketball in particular among all other sports.
But how do you treat something like a batter running to first base trying to beat out a throw and they run by the first baseman and maybe brush up against them? That's like the same thing, right? That happens like every inning.
I mean, there are opportunities for sure. I'm just saying in comparison to other ones, I mean, I would not say that someone jogging by a first baseman is that different from like being in a supermarket, you know? Like it's certainly less risky than going to like Whole Foods.
It's so tricky, right? Yeah, and you're right. Like, tennis is safer because you're 100 feet away, but I'm just like, is this just a placebo? No placebo workshopping. But in this situation, like, do we think this is safe just because they're far apart? Because the risk is just the same if you're in the same room as somebody. Like, I just maybe have less faith in distancing because I think that is just to make us feel better.
Well, I mean, as far as what we've been told overall, you know, they're like, yeah, 6 feet. I mean, again, we know that things change, but if you ask me if tennis is totally safe to do with somebody, I would say, yeah, it's like 99% safe. Basketball, I'd be like, no, that's definitely not safe.
Yeah, the act itself in a vacuum, if tennis players don't switch sides, sounds safe to me. Or, you know, like, don't touch the tennis balls and don't touch their faces. But I think basketball, right, the proximity is too close. Football, you cannot do, maybe. Rugby is out of the question.
I just think basketball is very, very much screwed in this in terms of figuring out how to get the sport up and running in a way that most other sports aren't.
They can't do it. I can't see a way for Silver to figure this out.
Like, not only are we talking about the stands, which is common to all their sports, the rosters have a bunch of guys on them. I mean, it's not tennis where you can be like, okay, one-on-one. They are large rosters of players. They are physically touching constantly. There are, like, on many plays, 10 people within, like, the lane that are all right there. You can't wear a mask when you're playing basketball.
And you're relying on everybody to behave the same way, which no humans do. Even if you get tested the day before, you have like a window of behavior in between then and the game. It's interesting. I don't know how Silver does this, because if he resumes the season and one player gets sick, then he's been irresponsible.
I mean, yes, you could say, okay, we're going to test every single player. We're going to have protocols in place where they're tested before every game, where they are being ushered in, like, sterilized cars back homes to their family. But then you're not talking about them like human beings.
And then you got to do the same thing with their family and then their family's
exactly.
family.
And how are they getting groceries and et cetera, et cetera. And the way that this works, if one of those guys gets it and isn't tested immediately, it's an absolute nightmare if you're the NBA.
I don't know how they do it. I really don't.
And they've already got a stigma of being coroned up.
They were the gateway. They were the impetus of all this, right? Go Bear.
Man, Go Bear, he didn't get it from those microphones. That was the day before.
I know.
Let's just correct the record. Yeah. We know enough about this disease now to know that he had it before then. Maybe he got it from Donovan Mitchell and not vice versa. We don't know. Maybe he got it from, Christian Wood. Don't know. We do not know how this got spread around.
And we do
maybe
not
they
know.
Maybe they got it from a trainer. We just don't know.
Yeah. There's that funny footage of a fan took on the sidelines of Donovan Mitchell warming up, and the fan was like, "Yo, let me pass you the ball," and he's like, "No, man, I don't want to catch that virus." And I'm like, "Oh, that's not quite how it works, right?" Like, Donovan Mitchell at that point is not safe from the virus. Standing there, like.
I mean, hey, maybe Mitchell is a germaphobe, and maybe he was really, really careful. But at that point, we still didn't know how this got moved around.
And we'll never know. Like, there's players who tested positive that didn't come out, and it made me think of Karl Anthony Towns a bit, which
I just mean Christian Wood could have breathed in Donovan Mitchell's face or someone else who had it. And even though he's being very diligent about washing his hands and social distancing, it's like, man, these guys were playing basketball. As we were just talking about the difficulty of curtailing the spread of corona on the court, they were doing that.
I mean, this is more of a privacy conversation. And that's why I bring up Karl Anthony Towns. And he had an awful week. And I think the basketball community responded well. And, like, we all wish him the best. But, like, I think, we found out about positive players who didn't come out. Like, I believe the Nets had positive cases, and we only know of one player who decided to make it public. So, we have to respond to people's wishes here, and we're only going on what we know, and which is not that much.
Right, there was a lot of teams that surely had players who did not announce it. I think the NBA did it for a little bit and was like, wait a minute. We're getting hammered for having access to tests that other people don't have, and we're generating news about our players testing positive. Like, let's just stop announcing stuff.
Yeah, there's no upside except for
we never found out tweets. Like, if there were players on, like, the Milwaukee Bucks. As far as I know, maybe there were, maybe there weren't. They just kind of stopped. Yeah. like, all right, let's just refrain from associating ourselves with coronavirus for a little while.
I mean, we're almost at a huge debate that will have no answer, because Google and Apple are developing a technology together that will alert you on your smartphone if you're in proximity of someone who has tested positive. And they're just moving ahead with this technology, and we have no privacy laws to kind of like curtail this in real time. I mean, our policymakers are so slow anyway that this technology will be available even before Mitch McConnell can like get his thoughts straight, and we're heading towards a really big impasse, I think, in society.
That'll be exciting.
It's gonna suck. It's gonna suck, and like we see it in the NBA, right? Like, are we allowed to know who has it? As fans, no. But if you were going to a game, I'd want to know if I was courtside. I mean, not like this virus is like that, but like someone might care. And I mean the virus is not like that, meaning like we understand it in a way that we can take precaution. It's not an understandable, or it's not misunderstood. Like we can predict the way it behaves. So if you're courtside, they've taken precautions, we hope. But
we're not going to be having fans sitting courtside while there is a chance of getting corona. It's just not going to happen.
But this is going to be 2030 stuff. Like in the year 2030, we're going to want to know, right?
I mean, we're going to see some pretty remarkable violations of privacy in the name of coronavirus. And we've already seen the overextension of like the surveillance state in many ways. And in general, we've said this a lot about coronavirus. It's not going to, it will probably not act as a reset button. It is going to be a steroid for all the things we don't like.
It's an accelerant.
Exactly. It's not curtailing stuff. It's pushing it forwards much faster than before, whether it's automation, it's, biometric surveillance, it's the death of small businesses and places that we like. This is an utter calamity.
It's Gattaca, not Mad Max. It's gonna streamline all the stuff we. No,
this is an absolute like calamity in every possible way.
Yeah.
Anyway, in good news.
Yes, basketball. Let's do this.
Well,
Gar Forman.
Gar Forman got
fired. Shout out to Bulls fans. Does that make them happy? I hope so.
So let me ask you this on this same topic, right? Because it was sort of like, look, the NBA is suspended. We'll try to do some little fun games for you guys, but all hands on deck here, man. It's a national emergency. And the Bulls are like, actually, yeah, we're just going to hire a new GM.
Yeah.
Is it weird to do it now?
I mean, yeah, but Gar Forman has been there for so long, and I don't know how he feels or how his family feels, but I feel like this was not a surprise. I want front offices to make decisions in this time because we don't need to play games right now, and you can do stuff like I'm trying to work at home, and so should they, and so I don't feel bad about it, but it feels surreal. It's just like, is this too soon? Is it ever too soon?
That's all I'm saying. And like, I don't think that teams are obligated to kind of sit on their hands during this period, but they kind of are. Although my personal agenda is like to open everything back up in terms of trades and let's create real intrigue here and not horse tournaments.
Yeah.
But I also do feel like it's kind of foul, man. You fired the guy during the corona pandemic. You kicked your 18-year employee to the curb.
I know. Well, like, I don't think we'll care as a community until something happens that we don't like. Like, Gar Forman getting fired was kind of like James Dolan selling the team. There was a little bit of like celebration there, I think, for Bulls fans, and other fans just don't care. But when something happens that we do care about, let's say your dream comes true and the Knicks trade Mitchell Robinson and RJ Barrett and their first two picks for somebody people don't like. then we're going to be really annoyed. And it won't be because we're doing this at a wrong time. We just don't like what happened.
Also, like, were the Bulls just about to do this, and then Corona happened, and then they had to sort of delay 3 weeks? I'm like, all right, let's do it now.
Yeah.
Or was it just after 3 weeks of kind of bullshitting around, like, hey, why don't we just fire Gar? Like, I was thinking about doing it after the season, but, like, who even knows when that's going to happen? Let's just get his ass out the building, get someone else in here, and we can start strategizing now for when we get back. And I'm like, also makes sense.
Yeah, I actually have no problems with it. I mean, no Sinbin, the football is moving forward full steam ahead with their draft.
Yeah, but that's different, though.
Yeah, I know what you mean by that, but it also feels surreal.
Because that was planned. That was what was always going to happen. So what I'm saying is, like, the NBA is at an artificial standstill. It was just like, boom, stopped. Again, I don't know that there's anything wrong with it, but it is a little foul.
Fuck it. Let's go for it. Do whatever you want. Front office moves, whatever.
I mean, I'm in favor of that. I'm just looking at this optically. Hey, Gar, how you doing? You're good? Oh, your family's fine? Ooh, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, anyhow, you're fired. Yeah, just stay at home. Yeah, you don't have to come into the office anymore. Oh, you're already there. Oh, yeah, so perfect.
I mean, we kind of knew about this Gar Forman thing for years almost, right? And he only has to answer to one person. But, the Knicks switched it up like not too far before the Rona hit, and I think the Bulls were like, well, now that the Knicks did that, we could probably just get away with switching up shop. It just takes one person to start the whole domino effect with, like, moves, right? Like, the first coach to get fired just opens up the rest of the teams to reevaluate.
And again, maybe this was something that they were on the verge of doing. Maybe it was something they wanted to wait till the season ended. Clearly, this probably did not come out of nowhere.
Yeah, for sure. And he was as maligned as Scott Layden was in New York, I think Bulls fans did not treat Gar Forman they didn't like the Paxson Forman front office that much.
No, absolutely not.
Which is not their fault. Okay, this is where I get weird, right? This is the Knicks take. It's not their fault that they had the number, 8 pick or number 9 pick. Like, they just got unlucky. They didn't tank well, and Derrick Rose got hurt, and they didn't get Zion Williamson.
I mean,
there's a lot of stuff. But
I also would say that, Paxson did not get fired. He's still there. But
the old Mills, I see.
But Gar Forman was there for 18 years?
17, 18.
So it's hard to say, well, he just got unlucky. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but he was there forever.
Oh,
and it's more along the lines of, do you think this is the right guy for eternity? Because if not, you might as well move on.
Gar Forman is a bad front office guy. I for the framing of him is not as good as other front office guys, but the anger towards him is kind of just based on, like, well, Derrick Rose got hurt and now we're angry. Bulls fans really love those Derrick Rose years, and as we've seen on the internet in this last month, they think those years were championship years, and there was no Gar Forman chatter then. So my point is, like, he probably would still have a job if one of these lottery picks hit in the last 3 years.
They've also made some kind of questionable draft day trades. The one, the Doug McDermott trade was ridiculous.
Dougie McFuckets? Big fan. Big fan.
They took Denzel Washington in the lottery.
Denzel Valentine?
I'm sorry, Denzel Washington. Denzel Valentine. Wendell Carter hasn't done too much. They have not been. They have not done a lot.
Markkanen, Porzingis too.
People were not particularly pleased with the Butler trade after Markkanen sort of showed himself to be a kind of mediocre player.
These are all not good lottery slots, but he did pretty well with them. Markkanen wasn't slated to be a superstar. Wendell Carter has been hurt, but that's a hit. I would probably say he's on line for a big contract. And they haven't necessarily missed, but they haven't hit the home run.
Well, that's true. They don't have... when we were talking about the Bulls more than we ever have, just because there's no other news, I was saying I kind of like their roster, not as a good team, but I like a decent amount of the players on there. They have the god Luke Cornett. I mean, they've got some players that I find intriguing and nice role players. But you're right. Zach LaVine has to be your second best player.
Yeah, for sure.
He can be your lead scorer, but you got to have another star if you're going to win a bunch of games. You're not going to win them based on the back of Zach LaVine.
No, and if any of these teams even just lucked into Ja Morant, no one's getting fired. The Knicks aren't getting fired. The Gar Forman's still there. Things are looking up.
Yeah, Chicago was kind of crazy going back, and we've got the Jordan Bulls documentary is going to start on next Sunday, which will be exciting because we'll have something to talk about. But looking at their next 3 seasons, I forgot just how bad they were, like post Jordan. And that was after Pippen left and they traded Kukoc. They really just shut the whole thing down. So they won 6 finals in a row while Jordan played, excluding the year when he choked against the Orlando Magic, and we just don't count it. We just pretended that never happened. Their next 3 years, they went 13-37, but then 15-67, 21-61. A brutally bad team under Tim Floyd. They were absolutely awful. Even the year after that, when they went 21-61, they started the year 4-21.
I mean, you can't always have a Darko Milicic waiting in the wings to continue the success of your championship team. But, I mean, we accept that. We accept the terms of a team kind of being dismantled and having to rebuild from scratch. But it's been a long time, and Gar Forman has not had success for a while, and I think since the Rose injury, I think is the blight on his career.
I think mostly the Rose injury was huge.
Huge.
I think after that, they didn't really have an organizational outlook. They were trying to build a contender, so they had guys lying around like Gibson and Luol Deng. They had drafted guys like McDermott, who I'm assuming they hoped would be sort of immediate contributors versus like projects that could develop into good players. They were good enough that they hadn't gotten a bunch of high draft picks. Instead, they were getting the Bobby Portises. And they didn't bottom out. And they also didn't have enough young talent to really push it forwards. They got rid of Jimmy Butler, who was a legitimate star, but they didn't get a legitimate star back. They kind of just had the diminishing returns of treading water.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get a Thaddeus Young in here. You're like, all right, let's get an Otto Porter. Not bad players.
Taj Gibson.
Not great.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And when you draft, I mean, I really like Wendell Carter, but he's so old-fashioned that his ceiling is certainly capped. But they drafted all these players with kind of like, they had reasonable upsides. Like, I don't know what you expect at their draft positions. Like Lauri Markkanen, him being a superstar or even a star or even in the conversation of being an all-star is a reach, man, For
sure. I think the major discontent, I think, has been from Bulls fans. They really did not like them selling that draft pick that became your guy Jordan Bell. That
I love
that really stuck in people's craw.
Yeah.
They did not like the Butler trade either. Even when people were more enthusiastic about Markkanen, they didn't really love LaVine. They didn't really love LaVine's new contract. I think there was just a general dissatisfaction with, even Otto Porter. They got him and he got hurt. And I didn't think Otto Porter was a bad move for them. He just got hurt.
I thought he was too expensive.
He is too expensive, but everyone's too expensive now. I just mean the way that we're viewing like contracts going up the ladder. Tobias Harris is like $35 million. Like everyone's too expensive.
But you wouldn't have signed either of them if you were GM.
No. But I would think I would have rather had Otto Porter at his current contract than Tobias Harris, but he just ended up getting hurt, and he missed the whole season. And if you're a GM and you're like, we've invested a quarter of our salary cap in this guy who didn't play, and then Markkanen was the draft pick and from, who had some promise and looked to be a pillar, and he's whatever. Like, all right, what else we got? You can tell people were disappointed. And the Bulls also have the irritating issue of guys like, Dunn, whose contract is about to be up, and that aren't really good enough to pay, but might not be worth letting walk. Like, they have a lot of annoying decisions to make that you probably don't want these guys involved in because they're emotionally invested.
I mean, I'm going to feel...
Gar has some shit to prove. These are guys he drafted, guys he believed in. You kind of need, Carnosaurus to come rolling in here and say, like, I feel nothing towards these guys. Get them out of here.
Oh, yeah. The emotionless GM is the best GM. It should just be like a computer.
And they're kind of at that moment where they're going to have to make some decisions along those lines.
Yeah. Yeah, the hologram of Jerry Krause is, like, better than a real human being. But I think I'm kind of satisfied at the Bulls' ineptitude, and it's gonna come back again on Sunday when we watch another 10-hour documentary about how great the Bulls were, and I'm like, oh, they've been bad ever since. Like, that's okay with me. Like, whatever, man. Like, I don't want them to get Zion Williamson. If we had to, like, pick, like, we talk about the Bulls so much as this, like, perfect franchise, and I hope this documentary kind of pulls back from that, but there's no way it will. Whatever, fuck them. Be bad. I don't care. There has to be a bad team somewhere. I choose the Bulls.
I have no love for the Bulls being great, but I do I like having teams in places like Chicago and Miami and New York and LA. I like having them good. Those kind of classic cities. I know it's boomer, but that's like...
No, it's legit. It's legit.
Like, Chicago being good is cool. It's a big city. I mean, I don't care about the team more because, like, they're from a big city in terms of my interest. Because I never really liked the Bulls, even with Derrick Rose. Yeah. Like, they just were not a team I found particularly interesting. I never really loved Derrick Rose. I thought he was good, but I never loved him.
Yeah, he wasn't for me.
But I do like having, like, Chicago as, like, a muscular NBA team.
I was a big cheerleader for Kobe White's, like, kind of, like, development this year. So when he started dropping copious points, I thought it was kind of thrilling. So I definitely root for the players. I love Wendell Carter Jr. in his boringness, but I really liked him out of the draft. But as, like, the narrative of the Bulls, like, they deserve better, I'm like, get out of here.
Yeah, I don't agree with that either. I don't think the Bulls deserve better at all. I mostly mean Chicago being good is cool. They have nice colors. Yeah. They have good logo.
Yeah.
Like,
it
reminds me of the good Bulls. When you see that logo and, like, the red and black uniforms and they're a good team, I don't know. It's kind of there's a nice feeling of whist. You might understand.
Yo, their identity's sick. It's so good.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like when the Celtics are good, and you're like, I don't like the Celtics, but the Celtics being good, it's nice. It fits into our sort of the continuum of the NBA. Like the Sixers, the Celtics, the Knicks, the Bulls, the Lakers, just classic franchises. And a lot of those teams have been awful over the last, 2 decades, for example.
I mean, we've talked about it endlessly, but we could relitigate that tomorrow because this is always an interesting conversation. What are the franchises that can't handle prosperity, But
let's talk about that tomorrow. I mean, we won't, but we're going to tell you. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And maybe talk about it tomorrow.
Are the Bulls a losing culture franchise?
Yeah, they just don't want it enough.
They've been bad for 2 decades. I would say losing culture franchise.
No, come on. They won 60 games one year.
Okay. 1 year they were not losing culture.
They had 2 good little runs since Jordan. They were abysmal.
Rose?
They had the Rose era, and then they had the Deng era. it was Rose, Jimmy Butler era, and then you had the one with, like, Deng, and I don't think Taj was there yet. But they had it was like Kurt Heinrich and Deng. They were, like, decent.
So they won championships with Rose, Deng, and Butler. So every time Bulls fans are like 6 for 6, you're actually like 9 for 9. Like, I mean, all jokes aside, the Bulls franchise in a microcosm flies in the face of winning or losing culture. It just defies any like theory of that, I think, because those were good teams, but
the one that was pretty good, it was like you had Nocioni and you had Ben Wallace and Chris Duhon and Ben Gordon and Luol Deng, and they do not sound good in retrospect, but they did go 49-33.
And Jordan and Pippen fans would say, but did they win a championship?
No, they weren't that good.
Right.
But the one Rose team was 62-20, and the season after that they were 50-16 in the shortened season. Like, those are really good teams.
And that was an injury, but I mean, I'm being a jerk here, but this is what Michael Jordan fans, we're going to see this in this 10-hour documentary. Did he win a championship?
Nothing matters unless you win a championship.
To Bulls fans, right? Because he's perfect in the finals, but we don't talk about those years he didn't make it to the finals.
No, those don't count. When he lost, all those years that he lost before the finals, they don't matter. 6-0 in the playoffs. All that.
Mr. Perfect.
Just like the perfect pod.
Again.
We did it.
Daily. The perfect Tuesday pod.
Cookies.
In your area. Cookies.